At 7:30 on a Tuesday evening, Samuel Yoder carried 4 photographs, 1 hand-drawn map, and a folded page from the Texas Property Code into the Cedar Ridge Association meeting. Across the room, Grant Lawson had already placed a red violation notice on every board member's table. The notice ordered Samuel to remove 3 rainwater tanks from behind his barn within 10 days. If he refused, the association planned to fine him $50 for every day the tanks remained. Grant stood and pointed to a large photograph of Samuel's system. "Those containers are unapproved utility structures," he said. "They lower the appearance of the neighborhood, and no private owner can simply collect and distribute water however he wants." Several people nodded. Others stared at Samuel's plain straw hat, dark vest, and worn work boots. He was the only Amish farmer in a room full of homeowners with electric wells, automatic sprinklers, and monthly water bills. Then Grant made the mistake that changed the meeting. "State law does not protect this," he said. "The barrels come out." Samuel opened the folded page. "Would you like to read section 207 before we vote?" Grant stopped speaking. Outside, the first official watering restriction of the summer had begun. Samuel's young peach trees had not received public water for 12 days. Yet their leaves were still green. The reason was sitting behind his barn, inside the same tanks Grant wanted removed. Want to know what happened when an Amish farmer answered a legal threat with 1 page of Texas law? Subscribe now and stay with us. 6 months earlier, Samuel Yoder had not been thinking about lawyers, fines, or board meetings. Samuel was 61 and lived with Miriam on 7 acres near Cedar Ridge, a rural Central Texas development. Their Amish home had no grid connection, but the old deed placed it under the Property Owners Association. Then the winter rains became weak. By February, the stock pond was low. The soil beneath Samuel's peach trees broke apart in dry gray pieces. Weather reports warned that spring might bring less rain than normal. Across the road, Carl Reeves saw the same warning and hired a company to deepen his irrigation well. Carl was 54, managed 2 hardware stores, and kept 6 acres of lawn, ornamental trees, and vegetables. The drilling company charged him $14,800. "Water is not something to gamble with," Carl told Samuel. "You need a deeper well, a stronger pump, and a generator when the power goes out." Samuel looked at the metal roof on his barn. "I need to stop throwing away the water that already falls here." Carl laughed. "It did not fall here last week." "No. But when it comes, I would like some of it to stay." Samuel had used barrels beneath gutters before, but he knew an old idea could still be installed badly. He wanted sealed storage, cleaner runoff, and no connection to the public water line. So before buying anything, he drew the system on brown paper. Rain would fall on 1,200 square feet of barn roof. Gutters would lead it through leaf screens. The first dirty flow from each storm would be sent away from storage. Cleaner water would then enter 3 sealed, food-grade containers behind the barn. An overflow pipe would carry extra water downhill into a shallow grass basin. A separate gravity hose would lead from the lowest tank to the orchard and vegetable beds. The water would never enter the house. No one would drink it. No pump would push it into a public line. Samuel wrote "nonpotable irrigation" on his plan, then asked his neighbor's daughter to print proper warning labels for the valves. The 3 containers had once held food syrup at a local bakery. The bakery manager gave them to Samuel because removing them would otherwise cost money. Samuel cleaned them, checked their history, and built a level stone base from material already on the farm. He spent $44.71 on new screens, fittings, washers, and an overflow hose. The gutters, wood, tanks, and gravity line were reused. When Carl saw the containers, he shook his head. You are putting 3 white boxes beside a barn that can be seen from the road. Grant will never allow it. Then I will ask what rule applies. You should ask before you build. Samuel nodded. Carl was right about that. The next morning, Samuel took his drawing to county permit clerk Elena Ruiz. She confirmed that his plan showed a separate, non-potable irrigation system, but warned him that larger structures, potable use, public water connections, and local construction rules could change the requirements. Rain does not make every design legal, she said, and a rain barrel is not automatically illegal. The details matter. Samuel wrote the date of the visit on his plan. For 2 weeks he built slowly. He placed screens over every inlet. He sealed the containers from sunlight and insects. He raised them enough for gravity to move water through the hose, but not so high that the base became unstable. Miriam helped him build a cedar screen along the road-facing side. Carl said the association will object to the white plastic, she said. Then the association can see cedar. And what will the peach trees see? Water, if the Lord sends rain. The first storm arrived on March 17th. Samuel and Miriam stood beneath the barn overhang as rain drummed on the metal roof. Water moved through the gutter, struck the leaf screen, and entered the first flush pipe. For 1 minute, the system worked exactly as Samuel had drawn it. Then brown water burst from a loose joint. The first flush pipe twisted sideways, poured against the stone base, and washed soil from beneath one corner. The first tank leaned 2 inches before Samuel closed the inlet. By the time the storm passed, the containers held less than 100 gallons. Mud covered the hose. One cedar panel had fallen flat. Carl watched from across the road. "How much free water did you collect?" he called. Samuel looked at the muddy stones. "Enough to discover where it escapes." But inside the barn, he felt the weight of the failure. He had spent days building a system that could have fallen during its first rain. Miriam placed the account book beside him. "You promised $45, she said. "I spent 29 cents less. Money is not the only cost." Samuel knew what she meant. If the base failed when the tanks were full, thousands of pounds of moving water could damage the barn or injure someone. The next morning, he emptied the small amount collected onto the grass basin. He removed all 3 tanks and rebuilt the base wider. He anchored the first flush pipe, increased the overflow capacity, and added a route that carried emergency spill away from the foundation. He reused stone and lumber, but he did not pretend the correction was free. It cost him 3 more days of labor. Elena reviewed a new photograph and reminded him that stored water is heavy. Samuel asked a retired builder from his church district to inspect the support before he replaced the tanks. The builder pushed on every corner. "Old methods still answer to gravity," he said. If you appreciate stories where the first failure becomes the most useful lesson, subscribe to the channel. Samuel had fixed the water problem, but the legal fight had not even begun. The repaired system faced a second storm in early April. This time, dirty roof water moved through the first flush line. Clearer runoff entered the first container, crossed into the second, and reached the third. The overflow carried the extra water safely downhill. Samuel opened the orchard valve. A small stream moved through the hose without a pump. The pressure was not strong. Gravity could not imitate Carl's electric irrigation system. But the hose filled a bucket, and the bucket watered a peach tree. Samuel calculated what the roof had offered. In theory, 1 inch of rain on 1 square foot of roof can provide about 62 hundredths of a gallon before losses. On a 1,200 square foot roof, that was roughly 744 gallons. The real amount was lower. Some water stayed on the roof. Some left through the first flush. Some spilled because the containers became full. That difference mattered. The system could not make water. It could only save a limited part of the rain that reached the barn. Samuel recorded the rainfall. the tank level, and every day he opened the valve. The peach trees received water near their roots instead of through a sprinkler that wet the air and road. By May, the young trees looked stronger. That was when Grant Lawson arrived. Grant was 58, president of the Cedar Ridge Association, and proud of keeping the development's appearance consistent. He drove slowly past Samuel's barn, stopped beside the cedar screen, and photographed the top of a white container visible above it. 2 days later, Samuel received his first letter. It said the tanks were visible utility equipment, installed without architectural approval. He had 14 days to submit plans or remove them. Samuel did not become angry. He copied his drawing, added photographs of the cedar screen, and submitted everything. At the next board meeting, Grant looked at the plan for less than a minute. "The rules do not list rain tanks as an approved accessory," he said. "Do the rules prohibit them?" Samuel asked. "Anything not approved can be denied." What change would make the placement acceptable? Removal. That answer troubled Samuel. Elena had explained that an association could use reasonable rules about placement, size, color, and screening. She had also told him that Texas Property Code Section 20207 prevented a property owners association from simply banning rain barrels or a rainwater harvesting system. Samuel had already placed the tanks behind the barn, away from the street, and built a cedar screen. He was willing to raise the screen or darken the tanks. Grant was not asking for a reasonable change. He was demanding that the entire system disappear. Samuel wrote a calm reply and cited the state code. Grant sent a second notice. This one declared the system an illegal private water utility and threatened daily fines after 10 days. Carl read the notice at Samuel's gate. "You cannot fight an association," he said. "Even if you win, the lawyer will cost more than a water bill. I'm not selling water. I'm not serving another house. I am watering my own trees with rain from my own barn." "Then take the tanks down and put them back after the board election." Samuel looked at the young orchard. A right used only when no one objects is not much of a right. Samuel did not assume one state law protected every detail. He returned to Elena, who confirmed in writing that the reviewed design remained separate from public plumbing and intended only for irrigation. She also repeated that drinking water, cross connections, or other design changes could trigger additional rules. Samuel then paid a town lawyer for 1 hour to read the deed, the notices, and the state statute. Her answer was careful. "The association may regulate reasonable details," she said. "It cannot turn those details into a complete ban that state law forbids. Offer to improve the screening. Ask for a written reason tied to a valid rule, and keep every claim narrow." The hour cost $175, almost 4 times the new hardware. Samuel recorded it separately as the cost of defending the system, not building it. June arrived with hard heat. Cedar Ridge entered its first outdoor watering limits. Public water could be used on assigned days, and waste running into the road could bring a warning. Carl's deepened well-produced water, but his electric pump ran longer. His lawn began to fade at the edges. The association delayed planting flowers at its entrance. Samuel used his stored rainwater carefully. He opened the orchard hose before sunrise and closed it when each shallow basin was damp. He never said the tanks could last forever. After 17 dry days, the third container was empty. After 23, the second was empty. Samuel reserved the first for the youngest peach trees and let several rows of beans go dry. Miriam saw him pull the dead vines. "People will say the system failed," she said. "It failed to be a river," Samuel answered. "I never asked it to be one." On the 27th day, a short storm crossed the county. It dropped less than 1 inch of rain, but enough water moved from the barn roof to raise all 3 tank levels. Carl watched the overflow enter the grass basin. How much did that roof catch? Less than the clouds gave it, and less than the tanks could hold, Samuel said. But more than I had yesterday. Carl's automatic sprinklers could deliver more water in 1 hour than Samuel's gravity hose. They could not operate during the restricted time, and they could not save water from a storm that had already passed. Samuel's system did one simple job. It moved a small part of the wet day into the dry days that followed. The association meeting came in July. Grant displayed the violation notice and argued that visible tanks harmed property values. Samuel placed his photographs on the table. One showed the tanks before the cedar screen. Another showed the first failed base. The third showed the rebuilt support and protected overflow. The fourth showed the finished screen from the road. Then Samuel unfolded his map. The blue line is rainwater, he said. It runs from the barn to the tanks, and from the tanks to the orchard. The red line is public water. They do not touch. He placed Elena's written confirmation beside it. Finally, he opened the Texas Property Code. The law did not say an owner could ignore every association rule. It allowed reasonable limits involving matters such as size, location, and shielding. But it also said a property owners association could not prohibit or restrict an owner from installing rain barrels or a rainwater harvesting system in the way Grant's complete removal order attempted to do. One board member read the section twice. Why were we told state law did not protect this? She asked. Grant looked at the association's general utility rule. Because these are large containers, not decorative barrels. Samuel pointed to the language covering a rainwater harvesting system, not only a small barrel. Tell me the screen height you require, he said. Tell me the approved color. Tell me the placement rule. I will consider a reasonable condition. But removal is not a condition. Removal is a ban. The board paused the meeting and called its attorney. 40 minutes later, the attorney gave an answer no one in the room expected. The daily fines should not begin. The board needed to review the application under the state law and replace the total removal demand with reasonable written conditions. Grant's face became red, but he did not argue with his own attorney. The board approved Samuel's system if he raised the cedar screen by 12 inches, stained it a dark natural color, and kept all containers behind the barn line. Samuel agreed. The changes did not hide the water from the government. They protected the view from the road. The system remained documented, inspected for its stated use, and open to lawful review. The association withdrew the violation notice and canceled the threatened fines. That was the moment from the beginning of our story. Samuel had not found a secret valve that made law disappear. He had found the exact rule that separated a reasonable condition from an unlawful total ban. But the summer still had one more test. In August, Central Texas entered a longer dry period. Several ornamental trees at the Cedar Ridge entrance turned brown. Carl shut down half of his irrigation zones after receiving a high electricity bill and a warning about watering hours. Samuel's tanks were not full. The July rain had supplied only a limited reserve. He stopped watering mature trees and focused on the young peaches, herbs, and a small bed of vegetables for the roadside stand. Every morning, gravity delivered a slow stream. No electric pump turned. No public meter moved. By the end of each session, Samuel cleaned the inlet screens and checked the tank covers. Maintenance could not be skipped. Leaves blocked screens. Small cracks formed around washers. The first flush line had to be emptied and reset. After long dry periods, the roof carried more dust and bird waste, making the first dirty runoff especially important. This was not free water without work. It was rain saved through planning, storage, and regular attention. One afternoon, Carl crossed the road, carrying the receipt from his deepened well. $14,800, he said, and I am still afraid. to turn on the pump. He looked at Samuel's peach trees. 2 had lost some leaves. The others were green, and every young trunk was alive. "Your barrels saved the whole orchard?" "The rain saved most of it. The barrels saved some rain. I also let the beans die so the trees could live." Carl looked toward his own brown garden. "Would you show me the legal way to do this?" Samuel did not hand him a secret plan. "First, decide what the water will be used for. Second, keep it separate from drinking water unless qualified people design and approve that use. Third, ask the local office what applies to your property. Fourth, read your association rules beside the state law. Fifth, build for the weight, the overflow, insects, and maintenance." That sounds less exciting than a loophole. It is also less expensive than a fine. Carl installed 2 smaller tanks behind his workshop that autumn. He submitted the placement and screening plan first, kept the water separate from the house, and received approval in 9 days. The board then replaced its unwritten ban with a clear policy covering placement, secure covers, setbacks, and reasonable screening. It did not approve every possible system. It ended the claim that no system could be approved. Grant never apologized publicly, but in October, Samuel saw him measuring the gutter on the association clubhouse. "Planning another violation?" Samuel asked. Grant looked embarrassed. "The flower beds use more water than I thought." Samuel handed him the number for the county office. "Tell them exactly what you plan to connect." 1 year after the first muddy failure, Samuel opened the farm account book. New hardware had cost $44.71. Legal advice had cost $175. Reused wood still required labor, and the system needed cleaning and inspection. It had not produced unlimited water. It had not replaced every source. It had not made unsafe roof runoff automatically safe to drink. Over the year, it kept thousands of gallons of seasonal rain on the property, limited by the roof, rainfall, losses, and tank capacity. That water helped young trees survive and moved without fuel or electricity. Samuel also learned that Texas exempted qualifying rainwater equipment from state sales tax. The saving was small, but it proved the state had written support for the practice into law. The real enemy was not a secret government plan to own every raindrop. It was careless information. One person might say, every barrel is illegal. Another might say, no rules exist. Samuel's answer was more useful. Know the use, separate the systems, check local rules, build safely, and keep the documents. On the next spring morning, rain struck the barn roof again. It washed dust toward the first flush line, then moved through the screens and into the tanks. When storage reached its limit, the overflow carried the rest toward the grass basin. Samuel stood beneath the overhang with Carl and listened. No motor started. No meter turned. No secret pipe crossed into the house. There was only rain, gravity, and a system that stayed within the purpose written on Samuel's first brown paper plan. Carl watched the tank level rise. So the law gave you the water, after all, he said. Samuel shook his head. The law did not give me the rain. It only stopped someone else from pretending I had to waste it. If this story showed you that real independence begins with good information, subscribe now and join us for the next one. Remember, the safest system is the one whose owner knows where every pipe ends and which local rules apply. This fictional story uses Texas rules. Laws, codes, association restrictions, and health requirements vary by location. Drinking water systems and connections to public water can require treatment, safeguards, notice, licensed work, or approval. Confirm current requirements with qualified local officials.